This episode is made possible by Intuit MailChimp. Ever heard of a cluster? It's the result of marketers grouping customers with different behaviors into one big mess. But with MailChimp, you can use real-time behavior data to personalize emails for every customer based on their browsing and buying behavior, turning your customers into customers. Intuit MailChimp, the number one email marketing and automations brand. Visit MailChimp.com/personalize for more information. Based on competitor brands, publicly available data on worldwide numbers of customers in 2021 and 2022. Availability of features and functionality vary by plan, which are subject to change. Hello, everyone, and thanks for hanging out with us for the Behind the Numbers Weekly Listen, an e-marketer podcast made possible by Intuit MailChimp. This is the Friday show that is dealing with a heat wave. The planet's ruined. But for now, things are great. Sorry to everyone who has kids. I'm your host, Marcus Johnson. In today's show, what to make of the writers' strike deal?
It's, I think, pretty likely that the number of shows that all these services produce is going to start dropping. And so these deals are going to be great for people that can get into writers' rooms, but there will be, I think, fewer writers' rooms to go into.
Is the synthetic social network coming?
We would have to willingly make the choice to choose between some sort of AI feature versus talking to a real person, interacting with our social circle, friends and family. And I think that's the distinction we need to make here, and why I think we won't switch to synthetic social networks anytime soon.
Can AI help customer service chatbots?
I think it's also good to remember that when customers are going to interact with customer service, they're usually already frustrated. They're not in a good mindset. I think that sets the bar pretty high for the experience.
What will wearable AI tech look like? And when do most people retire? And how much do they have saved up? Join me for this episode. We have three people. Let's meet them. We start with our Director of Reports Editing, based in the Northern Hemisphere of New York. It's Rahul Chadha.
Hey, Marcus. Nice to be here.
Hey, fella. We move further south and we run into one of our Directors of Forecasting, based in New York City. It's Oscar Orozco.
Hello, everyone. Happy to be here.
Hey, chap. And you keep going further, and eventually you will run into a gentleman who is our senior analyst covering everything digital advertising and media, residing around Philadelphia. It's Max Willens.
Yo.
Bang. There they are, folks. The three gentlemen who are joining us for this episode. What do we have in store for you? We start with a deal. The writers and the studios have come to an agreement. So what does the deal entail, and what happens next? We then will have the debate of the week, where our panel will give us the for and against arguments from three separate topics and news stories. We'll debate those, and then we move to dinner party data, some random trivia, a lot of it. So we'll try to get to that as fast as possible, because it's really the main reason people tune in. Anyway, we start, of course, with the story of the week. What to make of the writers' strike deal? The Hollywood writers' strike is over, and they won big, writes Alicia Wilkinson and Emily Stewart of Vox. They explain that on September 24th, after 146 days of labor stoppage, the second longest strike in Hollywood history, the Writers Guild of America, that's the writers' side, and the Alliance of Motion Picture and TV Producers, the AMPTP, that's the studios, the writers and the studios reached an agreement. It officially ended 2 days later. Actors, they're still on strike, so this is just the writers. Actors are still on strike, this deal between studios and writers. The deal includes a number of things. I'll list five quickly. One, an increase to minimum wages and compensation, 3 times what studios initially offered. Number 2, increased pension and health fund rates. Number 3, improvements to terms for length of employment and size of writing teams. That had been shrinking a lot. Number 4, better residuals, think royalties, including foreign streaming residuals. And number 5, terms for artificial intelligence, with an agreement that doesn't prevent writers or productions from making use of generative AI, but prohibits using software to reduce or eliminate writers and their pay. Gents, your takes on the deal?
So I feel like the way I've been thinking about this is the writers won the battle, but that victory may have little bearing on who wins the war. And by that, I mean a lot of what you described at the end of that listing of the terms that the writers secured. There is, at the moment, the studios, as you say, cannot basically crowd writers out or whip up scripts just using generative AI, but there is nothing preventing the studios from training generative AI using the scripts that they already have in their possession, which I think doesn't preclude them from just spending a couple years really, really training an AI to produce scripts on their own in the future. There's also the issue of compensation, and it's great that they won these short-term wins, but the reality too is that with streaming's economics looking shakier and shakier for the streaming services, I should say, it's, I think, pretty likely that the number of shows that all these services produce is going to start dropping. And so it's going to be, these deals are going to be great for people that are on, that can get into writers' rooms, but there will be, I think, fewer writers' rooms to go into. So overall, I think it's hard to look at this as anything other than a win in the short term, but if you look further out, it's harder to be as unreservedly optimistic.
No, these are great points, Max. No, I think you make really great points there. You mentioned how it is sort of a short-term win. Keep in mind, this is a deal only out to 2026, so we'll be revisiting all of these clauses and deals again very, very soon. By then, who knows what the ecosystem is going to look like. But I thought of it on the surface as a nice win for the writers. But, the focus for me was really on kind of the losers here. And you talked about it a bit there with it being the streaming platforms, the media companies. For them, it's without a doubt a clear loss here. I couldn't help but think about, how a lot of the focus recently has been on international expansion. And I think many of them have hinged their success and growth plans on scaling up there. And I think they thought they could limit costs there. But I was really focused on that last bit, which was, Marcus, you mentioned the residual model for international viewership, which bases the payment on the number of foreign subscribers that these platforms have. And they estimate, the Guild, that it will increase foreign residuals up 76%. So I wonder what kind of impact that's going to have on business overseas and on the content that's produced overseas. A lot of the growth is coming there. And I think that's where it's really going to hurt the streaming platforms.
Yeah, it's a great point. And yeah, it does. When you're zoomed in, it does look like a win for one side, a loss for the other. But both of you gents, you zoomed out from that, which I think is really important. Daniel Konstantinovich, who writes for our briefing, was saying the outcome of the Hollywood strikes isn't just about actor and writer compensation, but about rethinking the existing streaming business model. So I don't know, Rahul, is this model even sustainable? It does seem to some extent like they've kicked the can down the road.
I mean, I think it's sustainable, but I think we're going to go through a right-sizing process. The model is just going to have to rework itself in a way where companies who are trying to monetize through streaming platforms, and if they're replacing revenue from like a linear TV model, it's just never going to hit that mark. They're going to have to figure out what does everything look like in this new world. And I think, we've mentioned that they're going to have to probably reduce the content that they make. And I think that that's a necessary part of them kind of right sizing to what the market can bear. I think we're past the peak TV era, and we're in a place now where people are basically trying to figure out how to make some amount of money from their streaming platforms. I think the way they were being run previously, when everything was sacrificed for scale, is just unsustainable.
Yeah, I think what's so interesting and kind of depressing about this is that, we're starting to head toward, I think, is a market that looks like lots of other digital media ecosystems where things are still pretty good for the people at the top, maybe not as fabulous as they were in the earlier era, but they're still pretty good. And they're maybe slightly more livable for the people that at the furthest edges of the long tail. But if you're in the middle, you get squeezed really hard. Like, I think about the transparency thing, which is apparently one of the most vicious fronts between these two sides. And what they got was essentially something that's great for the Ryan Murphys and the Shonda Rhimeses of the world, where, if you have a show that gets viewed by more than 20% of a streaming service's subscribers, you get a nice fat bonus. And this is information that's going to be very tightly guarded. I think 6 people total on the writer's side get to actually see this information. And, again, that's great for the people that, hit the big time, strike gold with a series. But if you're someone who's, trying to kind of make a name for yourself and you make a show that's kind of cool and, some people like it, but it doesn't do huge numbers, but maybe it's a step up in visibility, you have nothing that you can grab onto to show to your agent or to show to the studio and be like, look, I have an audience. Look, people care about this. They just, can either decide to stay on that treadmill a little longer till they hit a giant hit, or, they get worn out and kind of thrown onto the scrap heap. And I think that's a real bummer, especially considering the initial promise of this whole new era would be more choice, more quality, more stuff for individualized audiences. And it just seems like that's rapidly falling away.
And Max, I have a question for you. I mean, do you think that the writers they're not better off at all from where they were a few weeks ago? I mean, it feels like that's kind of how I'm interpreting it. Okay.
No, absolutely not. I mean, like the reality is that they're getting paid more. There are minimums being put onto the writers' rooms. There is some discretion there, but the people that are in this business are definitely in better shape than they were 2 months ago. But I just think it's still a very precarious business. And maybe it always was going to be that way, but that's my takeaway from it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one that I think you mentioned some version of this basically like when you started, Max, but won the battle, you look up, there's a bigger war going on, a lot of other things still to figure out. I want to come back to something Rahul said in terms of right sizing, because Daniel Konstantinovich, who I mentioned earlier, was saying one likely outcome will be further price hikes, which won't be welcome considering most streaming services have already increased prices this year and a fair amount over the last couple of years. I'm just looking at a chart here from the Wall Street Journal showing Hulu, Max, Netflix, Disney Plus, Peacock, Apple TV Plus, all with prices going up. Netflix, according to the Wall Street Journal, have already said that they're going to be increasing their prices, starting with the US and Canada in a few months. So they're already prepping folks for that increase. And it's because these companies and studios have struggled, what with the strike. The streaming service Max, owned by Warner Brothers Discovery, they were saying they expect the strikes to cost it up to $500 million this year. And then Brooks Barnes and John Coblin of the New York Times noting that analysts have estimated studios will forego as much as $1.6 billion in global ticket sales for movies that were initially scheduled for release this fall, but pushed to next year because of the actors' strike.
Can I just say,
please,
if Netflix costs $25 a month, I'm getting rid of it. To me, it's not worth that, like it's fine to have if you're paying $8, $9, $10, $11, $12 because, there's a couple of silly things and maybe once a year they have some big show that I feel kind of culturally obligated to watch. But like, I don't want to pay $25 a month to have access to like 5 different countries' versions of Is It Cake? Like, it's not worth that to me. It's not sufficiently high quality. And I think that that's one thing that is going to be really ugly and kind of messy as these, differing forces crash toward each other.
That's the big question, right? What's the ceiling? What's the ceiling for these streaming services before people say enough is enough? I thought I saw some research recently showing that people have dropped at least one of their streaming services from their bundle. Maybe that's more to do with just the current climate and less to do with what they would ordinarily pay for all these streaming services. But yeah, a lot of them starting to, especially the kind of mid-tier streaming service, starting to bump up against that or get close to that $20 mark. And maybe that is a bridge too far for a lot of folks.
I mean, one of my biggest takeaways was that Netflix was at the bottom here as the most impacted out of all the streaming platforms. And I think it has a little bit to do with the high prices already. Keep in mind, guys, that they are pushing people to these new sort of ad-supported tiers as well. So I think it could benefit them there, where the gap widens with ad-supported tiers, which will probably remain in the similar range in terms of price. Mm-hmm. But this can have an impact on the ad business as well, which we didn't touch on a lot. But I think that, and as I mentioned, the international push, all things to be worried about moving forward.
Yeah. Well, to touch on that for a second, Daniel, again, should have had him on. But he was mentioning about ad prices. CPMs could also jump significantly during next year's upfronts, but only if streaming platforms have the content to back them. They were already asking for historically high CPMs this year. Netflix now charging around $40, $40 CPMs, down from $55 last year, but the need for greater revenues could see those ad costs go up again. He was noting Bill Bradley of Adweek saying the overall impact on advertising remains to be seen. Buyers telling Adweek that strikes didn't affect TV upfront talks dollar-wise, with sports and unscripted content expected to take the bulk of the viewership for fall, but an August Innovid survey showing 3 in 4 brand and agency professionals acknowledged that writers and actors strike would impact their ad plans, with nearly half saying they plan to diversify their inventory and media channels. 1 in 6 said they decreased their budgets. Let's wrap this up before we move to the debate. What's next for the actors' strike negotiations? The part we said is still ongoing. Their union, the Screen Actors Guild, demanding a revenue sharing deal with the streaming companies and an 11% rise in basic wages, which the studios have thus far rejected. The Economist thinks a few more weeks of negotiation look likely, and so factoring in a similar ratification process, things are unlikely to get back to normal much before Thanksgiving in late November. And then that Economist article going on to note that the problem with that is that it means a production crunch at the time when Hollywood is normally winding down, with the industry on hold for nearly half a year. It says film and TV schedules in 2024 are looking rather bad, so studios will rush to cram in as much production as they can before the end of the year, time running out to save next year's summer blockbusters. All right, folks, that's where we'll leave the story of the week. Let's move now to the debate of the week. Today's segment, Make the Case. Where our panel, Rahul, Oscar, and Max, present the for and against arguments for each of the following questions based on 3 news stories. 2 contestants face off per question. Also, the following takes don't necessarily reflect the analyst's personal views. Their job is to just present the best case regardless and offer objective analysis just for you. We start with Max versus Oscar for question 1. The synthetic social network is coming, suggests Casey Newton of The Verge. What are we talking about? Well, he thinks that between ChatGPT's new surprisingly human voice and ability to see objects, and Meta's AI characters, our feeds may be about to change forever. He offers that you can imagine the next steps here. A bot that gets to know your quirks, remembers your life history, offers you coaching or therapy, entertains you in whichever way you prefer. A synthetic companion, not unlike the real people you encounter during the day, only smarter, more patient, more empathetic, and more available. So the question is, are we heading towards a synthetic social network, one where you're interacting more with a chatbot than a feed? Max will present the we will soon switch to synthetic social networks and AI companion. 1 minute on the clock, make the case.
So the crux of the argument I'm about to make is that we rely on these platforms to entertain us, right? That's basically why we all open up Instagram or TikTok or Snapchat all the time. And I think that as long as these companies make an effort to make these AI kind of assistants or companions as winsome as possible, there's no reason why we wouldn't all just kind of gradually get used to the idea of interacting with a synthetic social network. Already, when I open up Instagram, more and more of what I see is not content from my friends, family, and acquaintances, but just random meme accounts that Instagram thinks I'm going to find entertaining. And, AI generated content or feedback or interaction is not that far away from that. So I think that as long as we are interested in using these things to entertain ourselves, then a synthetic social network is a very realistic possibility.
Very nice. Oscar, you will be presenting that we won't switch to synthetic social networks and AI companion. Make the case.
You make some good points there, Max. Sure, we do use these platforms to entertain us, but we choose how we want to be entertained, right? And I think that's the important thing here. We would have to willingly make the choice to choose between some sort of AI feature versus talking to a real person, interacting with our social circle, friends and family. And I think that's the distinction we need to make here, and why I think we won't switch to synthetic social networks anytime soon. Keep in mind, sure, AI can help shape the platform itself, and I know developers love the efficiencies that it's causing, but in terms of the user, I think we're far off from choosing that, interacting with an AI bot over an actual person, far off from doing that. Keep in mind, people are creeped out by AI still. They're worried about privacy concerns and sharing too much. There was a poll from Reuters not that long ago. 4,400 adults, 61% said they believe AI could threaten the future of civilization. And more than 2/3 are worried about the negative consequences of AI infiltrating our lives. So I don't see this happening anytime soon.
But it's got jokes, and that's all. I think your points are very good too.
Here's to.
Rahul, any thoughts on this, mate?
I mean, I think we talked a little bit about the future of social networks a couple episodes ago. And, it's like it boils down to a weird semantic issue where it's like Max talked about the expectation, and Oscar did too, that when you're on a social network, you originally were interacting with friends and family, but it's increasingly becoming a distribution channel for entertainment effectively. So, I think it really boils down to like what do you want to describe as a social network these days?
Yeah. Yeah, I could see people interacting with social networks with a personal assistant to help serve them up that content and being like, oh, anything new? And it's like, oh, well, these things just came through. It's like, no, I'm more looking for this type of content. And it serves those things up. And so I could see some kind of combination of the two actually going hand in hand. All right, let's leave that question there. Let's move to question 2. We have Oscar versus Rahul. Customer service is what we're talking about. Customer service is getting worse, and so are customers. But what could fix it? Questions The Economist. It points out that besides dropped calls, the most common irritation in customer service interactions is being stuck with a chatbot, according to contact center software company Genesys. Could ChatGPT, like generative artificial intelligence, generative AI, make things less awful? These tools offer more human-like interactions than earlier generations of customer service bots, once trained on past call transcripts and other company data. They also make fewer mistakes than the off-shelf version of ChatGPT, the article suggests. The question is, can generative AI chatbots like ChatGPT help with our customer service woes? Oscar's up first. Generative AI chatbots like ChatGPT can help with our customer service woes. Make the case.
I know everyone is surprised to hear that I'm saying can here when I said that we would not have synthetic social networks. Well, but let me explain why. There's two reasons.
You're all over
here.
the place.
No, not at all. I'll make it clear. 2 reasons. People in this case have to willingly choose to interact with a brand or company, right? So I think that there would be that understanding that they might be speaking to an AI chatbot. Why is that the case? Because we already have scripted bots now when we interact with companies and sort of that customer service interaction that we've all dealt with it. And I think people will be excited to sort of have their one-on-one interactions with a more sophisticated version of that. So I think that's one reason why it can help. I think, speaking to the efficiencies of it, companies, of course, once these bots are trained and more adept at dealing with certain situations, they're going to be all over this, if not already. And, I think from the consumer's standpoint, all they really want is a chatbot or an individual that can provide a solution. So I think if these sort of ChatGPT bots, customer service bots, can do that, they have the power to provide a solution. I really don't think people will care whether it's a real person they're talking to or some sort of machine.
Rahul, generative AI chatbots like ChatGPT can't help with our customer service woes. 1 minute on the clock. Make the case.
I mean, the reality is that companies thinking about using this kind of AI are not motivated by creating a superlative customer experience. They just want to save money. And anyone who's gotten caught in an endless loop with an automated system when they just want to talk to a person can attest to how frustrating that experience is. And I don't think it really matters if it's a phone system, a chatbot, or AI. It's kind of like a pick your poison situation. It's really just another hoop. Like Oscar said, people want a resolution, but in my experience, you don't usually get a resolution for a complicated issue from any of those services. And I think it's also good to remember that when customers are going to interact with a customer service, they're usually already frustrated. They're not in a good mindset. I think that sets the bar pretty high for the experience. And I think the bar is being set incredibly low. Marcus, you said that, the expectation is, can it make this, quote, less awful? That's a pretty low bar. Less awful doesn't necessarily mean good.
2 things I took away from the article. 1, customers are less happy. The Economist was saying after rising steadily for 2 decades, the American Customer Satisfaction Index, a barometer of contentment, began climbing in 2018, although it has edged up from its pandemic nadir. It has shed all of its gains since 2006. So customers more annoyed, maybe because they just have less patience, because the second point here was customers are more unreasonable. The Economist also noting customers for their part are not helping. In this year's National Customer Rage Survey, another gauge of sentiment, 17% of customers admitted to being uncivil in their interactions with businesses. That's just the honest ones. Max, any thoughts here?
I generally share Oscar's opinion. I feel like working in a call center is a pretty miserable job, and it typically attracts people who, don't do it for very long. And so often when you wind up getting on the phone with somebody, they're, inexperienced, flustered, maybe not adequately trained. So in some cases, maybe dealing with a bit of a language barrier. I'm still remembering this one time I had to call my insurance company customer service because I had been denied coverage for something. And there was a long pause while I was on the phone with this guy who clearly did not speak English as his first language. And I said, "What's going on over there?" He said, "I'm sorry, sir. I'm busy trying to find a way to deny your claim." And I just got furious listening to this. And I realized as he was talking that he meant to say something else, but I just thought generative AI is never going to do that. And so it's probably for the best that we move in this direction.
I'm trying to ruin your life. Can you give me a second, please?
Yeah. Way too direct.
Like when they say, do you mind if I put you on hold? No. Yes, I do. But you're going to do it anyway. Let's move to question 3. Max versus Rahul for this last one. We're talking about wearable AI tech. Tech startup Humane recently demoed an AI-powered wearable the company is building as a replacement for smartphones. As Jacob Kastronakis of The Verge describes, the AI Pin device is a small black puck that slips into your breast pocket with a camera, projector, and speaker sticking out the top. The device lets you call someone using your palm as the keypad, gives you a summary of recent emails, calendar events, and messages on command, and can tell you whether it's safe to eat certain food items if you hold up the item in front of it. And it's basing this on your own individual allergies. Apple's former chief design officer, Johnny Ive, and OpenAI CEO Sam Altman are also reportedly looking to collaborate on building some kind of AI hardware device, according to the information. The question is, will these types of AI-powered wearable devices replace the smartphone? Max is up first. Wearable AI tech will become mass adopted and also could replace the smartphone. 1 minute on the clock. Make the case.
So I feel like when it comes to emergent technology, you need a kind of key group of evangelists to really get it to take root. And I think that for a wearable like Humane or the Pin or whatever thing that Johnny Ive and OpenAI come up with, it will be 2 very powerful, very influential groups. And those are tech executives and fussy elder Zoomer parents. I think a lot of people are sort of very preoccupied and worried about how much screen time their children get. But if you could give your kid a Humane, which essentially offers all of the things that parents want in smartphones for their children, which is an ability to access their location, an ability for their child to get information, an ability for them to communicate with parents. You get all of that from a Humane, but what you do not get is an attention-sucking, productivity-sapping, presentness-depleting screen. And so I think that those reasons alone are a major reason why these things will at least get a look by lots of different people, a chance to supplant the smartphone.
Rahul, wearable AI tech won't become mass adopted and can't replace smartphones. Make the case.
I mean, I think wearables face a chicken and egg problem. People won't adopt a device that doesn't have a robust ecosystem of applications, and nobody wants to build apps for devices that no one uses. I think one of the challenges I always think about when I think about wearables is that actually the lack of a screen means that app developers can't rely on a digital ad revenue stream easily. I don't know how people get served ads. And I think, the kind of gestational phase of wearables, developers need some other kind of revenue stream to lean on. I think the other challenge is that right now wearables have really narrow applications, like for medical purposes. And I think other uses are really about novelty and not practicality. You can use your Apple Watch to field a phone call, but I think if you're doing that, you might as well just buy a smartphone holster because, I think your sense of self-dignity has maybe been thrown out the window. But in all seriousness, I think it makes it really difficult to see a future for these wearables without a robust system of applications that can support them and drive mass adoption.
It is hard to pull off the smartphone holster. I've never seen anyone rocking one and gone, nailed it. Oscar, I could see you as a smartphone holster person. Any thoughts here? Would you wear an AI pin, Oscar?
I don't even own a smart speaker, or a smartwatch. So
you're gonna say smartphone then.
I do have a smartphone, very expensive one. So I really hope we don't have to replace that anytime soon with something new. But yeah, it seems really far off. I would have to also add, though, what Rahul said, Google and Apple are so entrenched in our just technology and our devices and everything we do. I would also add it would have to come from one of these 2 guys for it to really catch on as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and then do they want to ruin a perfectly good revenue stream? Probably not. All right, gents. A very nice segment. Let's move to the last one of the day. It's time now for dinner party data. This is the part of the show where we tell you about the most interesting thing we've learned this week. Let's start with Rahul.
I got some fun factoids about Lego. It was actually started in the early 1930s by a Danish carpenter named, and apologies to Danish speakers out there, I want to say Ole. I would say Ole, but I know it's totally wrong.
It's definitely not that.
Kirk Christensen.
We don't know what it is, but we definitely know what it's not.
So Mr. Christensen had to transition away from home construction and furniture making due to waning demand, and he instead pivoted to creating wooden toys. Lego didn't actually start using plastics until 1947, and it was actually a warehouse fire in 1960 that forced the company to fully transition away from wooden toys and to embrace plastic ones. Lego flirted with bankruptcy in the early aughts, but rebounded thanks to its partnerships with existing franchises like Star Wars, and in part by creating a successful series of movies. If anybody remembers the Lego movie, or I feel like I've aged out of the demographic for like the Lego Batman and I want to say Ninjago movies. That's how that's said.
I've heard they're good.
I don't doubt they might be great entertainment. I've just never seen any of that stuff. But it's pretty impressive. Last year, Lego had an annual revenue of about $9 billion and boasted operating profit margins that exceeded the luxury conglomerate LVMH and luxury sports car manufacturer Ferrari. So it's pretty incredible what they've done.
Not bad for a second act.
You said he was in construction and that kind of dried up. So he moved over to small wooden toys. Can you imagine his partner being like, what the hell are you doing? Go get a real job. No, I'm just playing. I just feel like I'm onto something here. Get out of my house. All right. Yeah, it worked out. So fair play to Mr. Christensen. Is that what his last name is?
That's right.
I'm not even going.
I don't know what's else a Danish person are supposed to pronounce that too. Yeah.
Mr. Lego. Oscar, you're up.
All right. That was a good one. Love Legos. So mine, Marcus, I think you're going to love this one. You do regularly, at least when I'm on, cover anything vehicle related. But I just saw this study today. It's from iccars.com. They published the latest update to their annual survey on the most popular car colors on the market. So does anyone own a car right now? What color are your cars?
We had this one.
This is new. It's been updated.
We had this like a week ago. Has it been updated since last week?
Stop. Really?
Most popular car colors, right? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah.
It's black and white. I think white's number one.
Well, you've
right?
covered this, but because it was new. Oh, gosh. Okay, I was going to talk about the update.
That's surprising.
Wait, what's the
white.
update?
It is white.
Of course it's white. What are you doing right now? Did you just listen to last week's episode and go, you know what?
I did not, man.
Oh, use that.
I thought we covered this months ago.
Hey,
this happens. What else do I have? Maybe I could probably pull
just
something.
car colors, or is there anything else in the survey?
There is something else, but it is related to the car. Let me look at something.
Wait, we just covered colors, so maybe there's more than in the survey that we haven't covered.
It's all colors. Forget it. I thought there was something down here, but it's all colors.
No, you recycle material here, Oscar.
I mean,
you won't stand for it.
I swear I didn't think it was. Okay. Might
do you want me to go with Max first?
Yeah. Maybe I can pull something. Great.
Okay. All right, Max, you're
up. This is awesome.
Because Oscar's just using old material.
Go ahead.
So, my dinner party data this week relates to popular concert tours. So, earlier this week came the news that Taylor Swift is not going to be the only global star to have a concert movie come out this year. Beyonce's will come out in early December. And there's been a lot of really confusing data come out about how much money all these tours are making. There's some that say it's going to be over $1 billion. There's some that say it's more like $500 million. There's some that say that Beyonce's is going to wind up having more economic impact than Taylor Swift's, and others the opposite. But the sort of easy takeaway is that as of probably the end of this year, Beyonce and Taylor Swift are going to wind up being the two highest grossing concert tours of all time. And I thought, well, okay, who's 3 through 10? Let me go figure that out. And so I found some data from Billboard. And so I'll give you the list in order, starting from 3 going down. So it's Elton John, Ed Sheeran, U2, Coldplay twice, Harry Styles, Guns N' Roses, and the Rolling Stones twice. And there's a bunch about this that I thought was really interesting. First being that this list is basically nothing but British artists.
Yes.
Beyonce and Taylor Swift coming on basically means there are now a whopping 3 American artists on this list, and the rest are Brits.
Is the second takeaway that Coldplay have been on tour for the last 50 years? Go
I was
home,
gonna say, I feel like
Coldplay.
Elton John's been on his
Go home.
farewell tour for 10 years now.
COVID is a big reason for this, because both of you are right. The Elton John tour that got onto this list was his last tour, and it went on because of COVID interruptions for over 3 years. There's also a tour on here that I think took 5 years to complete by Roger Waters. And the other thing that's worth pointing out here is that all of these tours occurred in the last 6 years, which says an awful lot about just how expensive, a really in-demand concert ticket is. And finally, I just want to, scold all of you that put the Rolling Stones on this list twice in the last 6 years. What's wrong with them? They're so old. They are so old, and they have been doing this for so much time. Just do something else. Take your kids to Margaritaville, or your grandkids or something. Just stop going to see the Rolling Stones, for God's sake.
What about just so many other great artists out there?
Saying.
And it's kind of what you're saying. It's when do we see something new? Because it's always the same artists over and over. Come on.
I'm surprised there weren't more boomer era acts on there, because I felt, I just assumed they were the ones with the most disposable income, and the bands like the Rolling Stones have an endless well of nostalgia to feed on.
Yeah, I feel like Elton's really milking it on this goodbye tour. Goodbye again.
I'm really going.
And encore, he's back. Oscar, anything, mate?
Yes, so...
Anything new?
Cars and colors. No, I'm joking.
Got to be kidding me.
Something a little different. No. All right, so I have an interesting one for you guys. I did pull this a bit ago. It was after I came back from some travel and I was jet lagged. I thought it was really interesting. So it was a study on giant pandas as well. People love
We've
pandas.
done this.
Stop.
Oh,
No.
I'm
No
kidding.
way.
We haven't done this.
Oh, stop.
Very.
Come on, man. Don't mess with
Sorry.
Don't mess with me.
Sorry, as you were saying, giant pandas.
I mean, it was in CNN. I swear I read the article, so possible. Okay, back to it. This is on giant pandas living in captivity who could be suffering from jet lag, which I thought was kind of funny, again, because I was very jet lagged coming back from my trip to Spain. So it was a study. Scientists went about figuring out whether animals that are in captivity all over the world, different types of environments and things like this. And what the study found was no surprise that it can have an impact, of course, on these animals that are not used to certain climates, that what they essentially feel is something similar to what humans would feel with jet lag when they travel far and their hours are off and they're not getting enough sleep, sleeping at weird hours. So this was from the journal Frontiers in Psychology, and what they essentially also found was pandas, kind of like humans, have a circadian clock, which means it's an internal body clock that runs approximately in 24-hour cycles. So that's probably why things like this impact them. So we all take cues from the environment. So when there are issues with the environment not matching with what the species is used to, it can have these effects like jet lag does. So it was pretty much with anything active, getting food, or even sleeping patterns were impacted. And it's things like daylight, temperatures, things like this, which can have an effect. So something for, I would say, zookeepers to keep in mind when they're deciding on what type of animals to have in the zoo. So I thought this was interesting.
I am surprised that there isn't an option. I think there'll be an option in the future. If you want to go to Australia and you don't really want to, it's a long flight, you don't want to be awake that long.
Mm-hmm.
You have the option to take an anesthetic basically, and they'll put you to sleep just for the flight. Don't you think that? Would you guys?
I thought that's what like Ambien or Xanax was for.
But I mean,
yeah,
one
that's
where
what the bar cart's for.
it's like.
But also, I guess it would only help maybe a little. According to this, the body would just be like, where am I? And why is it dark right now?
Yeah, it wouldn't
why is
help
so
much
hot?
for
I think
jet lag.
It might not help as much. And so
No.
that was another takeaway from this. Yeah.
You would skip the actual flight part, but yeah, the jet lag would still pummel
Still
you.
be there. Mhm.
You said you were suffering from jet lag coming back from Spain?
Yes, terribly.
Oscar lives in Portugal, for folks who are listening. It's like an hour
He's
flight.
I wish. I
Okay.
wish. No, it sucks. Not great.
Yeah, it's brutal. All right, folks, I've got one for you, but there's a lot. So let's see how much we can get through. So when do most people retire and how much do they have saved up? So first thing, the average retirement age is 66 for Americans, according to Gallup, which is up from age 60 in the 1990s, according to the Social Security Administration, SSA. The second thing here, you could need way more money than you'd think. According to 2022 CDC survey, the actual mean retirement age is 61. So with current life expectancy at 76, people can expect 15 years of retirement or a lot more. A 65-year-old woman has a 50% chance of making it to age 87. So that's 26 years of retirement. A man has a few years less, so potentially 24 years of retirement, according to the SSA. Third thing, less than 40% of individuals are actively participating in a 401k plan, according to the US Bureau of Labor Statistics. However, 75% of non-retired adults have some kind of retirement savings, notes the Fed. The problem is only 40% of these folks think their retirement savings are on track, in part because nearly half of people 40 to 80 have taken money out of their retirement plan, according to TD Ameritrade. A few more for you. Where retirement income comes from, 2023 Gallup survey, 48% of people who haven't retired yet are funding retirement through their 401k, but a higher share, 59%, of actual retirees say they're funding their retirement via Social Security. That's nearly double the number of those retiree folks who are using their 401k. 40% of people who get Social Security rely on it for over half of their income. For a quarter of married retirees, and half of unmarried retirees, Social Security accounts for at least 90%, almost all of their income. A quarter of married retirees and half of unmarried retirees. How much do people get? Is my fifth point here. How much do people get in Social Security in 2022? The average monthly Social Security benefit for retired workers was $1,800. That's $22,000 a year. That's only slightly more than you would make if you were above the national poverty line, which is $18,000 for a family of two. A strong reason that 15% of people over 65 live in poverty. That's double the national average of 8%. We talked about people living 15 plus years after they retire. Government data also shows that nearly 70% of individuals who reach 65 will need long-term care at some point. The median cost of assisted living facility is $5,000 a month, according to General Worth Financial Inc. Two more for you. How are Americans doing with their retirement savings so far? PwC report shows that the median retirement savings for people 55 to 64 is $120,000. So that's giving you $60,000 a year for 2 years, $40,000 a year for 3 years before that disappears. People younger than that, 35 to 44, they have just under 40,000, according to a 2017 report from PwC. Also, that data was backed up by a 2017 report from the Government Accountability Office. And the final thing here is retirement might actually be a bad thing anyway. National Bureau of Economic Research revealed that complete retirement leads to a 5 to 16% increase in difficulties associated with mobility and daily activities. People are doing less, so they are doing even less and doing even less. A 5 to 6% increase in illness conditions and a 6 to 9% decline in mental health.
Oof.
That's the most depressing dinner
Yeah,
party data I've ever heard in my
You're welcome.
entire life.
That was tough. There's so many takeaways from that. I mean, just the last one. So many people are not ready for retirement. I think that's the problem. The man would love you to think, keep working, but it's just that people are not. They're not used to having that extra time or not prepared for what comes after. So I think that's almost the biggest takeaway for everyone listening.
And some people just aren't allowed to. So my dad tried to retire the other day, and my mum told him no. I'm kidding. She actually said, let's talk about it in a few years. That's all we've got time for this episode. Thank you so much to my guests. Thank you to Oscar.
Thanks, Marcus. Thanks for having me.
Of course, thank you to Rahul.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, Marcus.
Yes, indeed. And thank you to Max.
Thanks, Marcus.
Thank you, mate. And thank you to Victoria, who edits the show, James, who copy edits it, and Stuart, who runs the team. Thanks to everyone for listening in. You can find us on Instagram at Insider Intelligence, one word, for all the behind-the-scenes content you can possibly desire. We'll see you guys hopefully on Monday for the Behind the Numbers Daily, an eMarketer podcast made possible by Intuit MailChimp. Happy weekends. Unless you're playing me in fantasy this week. I need this. I need this one. Oscar, how are you doing?
Terrible.
Are you 0-4 now? Don't say it.
Yes, man.
0-4. Oh my god.
Never in my life was I 0-2 and I'm 0-4. It's a disaster. I don't deserve it. I don't deserve this.
What do you mean you don't deserve this? You never get me to help you with the draft. You bring this on yourself. You're the
Could be,
you're
man.
the equivalent of the Panthers.